Yay! Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Royal News Network Saturday morning live stream. We do have a special guest, which is Miss Pippa, and she is hanging out in her little blanket on the floor here. So we normally don't, we're kind of maybe phasing out Saturday morning, moving to a different day, but there has been so much that's happened in the last 2 weeks that it really does deserve a live stream today. I was going to try to do it yesterday, but this week has been very weird for me. So I shared it with a bit of the members in the live stream that we had this week, but there's been so much going on, so much craziness. But I feel like there's a lot of interesting things to talk about and ways to kind of discuss something very, very interesting here. So the kind of the two main topics, and of course, as you guys comment, we may come to something else as well. But sort of the big thing I've noticed is that Harry and Meghan haven't been seen together a lot this year compared to last year, especially around this time. And I can't help but wonder why. Because they were salt and pepper, they were attached at the hip, and all of a sudden they're not together at all anywhere to be seen. So I think it raises a lot of very interesting questions about the state of the relationship and their dynamic because they have a lot of stress going on in their lives right now. But then we also have something really interesting, which is Catherine and William moving house, going to Forest Lodge, which will apparently be their permanent home. And that's something very interesting as well. So that's going to be a new change. It's still in Windsor Great Park, but it's further away from sort of Windsor Castle. They're actually fairly close now. They will be fairly close to Prince Andrew. Actually, it's fairly close to Royal Lodge. And so it's just like, very, very interesting things afoot. We also have, and I saw it on a Norwegian website and I thought I understood it. And then I was like, maybe I don't understand it. But I think I do. But there's been reports that Catherine Amalia has been the victim of deep fakes using her likeness for, let's say, inappropriate videos. And so that's been obviously a big concern. And she's had so many issues, I feel like. So I think there's just so much here to go over and other ideas that may come up. Obviously, as well, if you've been following the Marius case, Marius Borg-Holmby, the son of the Crown Princess of Norway, who's been charged with 23 criminal counts. We don't know. It's about mid-August when we should hear what the prosecutor will pursue. We have not heard that yet, as far as I'm aware. So I will double check, though, from our lovely friends at CO Cork in Norway and see what we have. But we do have this fan giving a super chat. Thank you so much this morning. Good morning, Brittany. Do you think Harry was part of this new Netflix deal or just Meghan? So we do know that both of them were part of it because both of them were mentioned. However, I think, and again, this is just my personal opinion, that Meghan is a lot more invested in this than Harry is. I think Meghan is infinitely more engaged, you could say, with this deal, with the possibility of making Hollywood work, these sorts of things. And I think Harry, for the most part, is checked out, which kind of goes into, sort of our main point of discussion for this topic. But I think it's just very true that Harry is just like, he doesn't like this Hollywood thing, I don't think. And I imagine as well that he's found it immensely difficult to navigate and have his projects essentially fail. Actually, their biggest failure, and I actually went through and I actually pulled the actual numbers. And by far their biggest failure was Heart of Invictus, which almost only got 300,000 views. Polo ended up with 1.1 million. Live to Lead got 846,000. I'm still confused as to why that happened, but the only reason I can think is that it got residuals from the Harry and Meghan series and that people were invested in that. And so I thought that was very interesting. And With Love, Meghan got 5.3, but the Harry and Meghan overall views, so their reality series, got 40.6 million. So Harry's, I think, heart was in Heart of Invictus, and it just utterly and completely failed. It's flopped. I think there's no other way to describe what happened there. And I think Harry, he has to be part of it because he is the actual draw. People are engaged with Meghan, but again, it's more that car crash mentality now. And so people are engaged with that aspect of it. But when it comes to like the overall view and everything, really Harry and his family are the draw and the key. So Netflix, I don't think, didn't want to sign just her because her track record is bad anyways. She's not great either. Like their track record, guys, is just simply mid. It's mid. Like there are YouTubers who can get 1 million views in a day. So my video on the Jordanian royal wedding got 1 million views in a day, same as Polo over like the over like 7 months. So this idea that they are these huge draws, I feel like is a bit of a misnomer, and that part of this deal, they just do need both of them. And I will say in my theory as well, personally, I do think that I would not be surprised if separation has already occurred, and we'll again get into that, and that they're already somewhat leading separate lives, and that this is sort of a formality. And I would not be surprised if we find out later in a couple years that Meghan had been gathering footage this entire time for Meghan, My Divorce Story. Again, they did that with their Harry and Meghan series, that they were doing little filming and stuff like that for their own records for something like this. So if Meghan, and I believe Meghan was again the push behind that. So like Harry should be aware that she will turn and do the same thing to him that she did to his family, or that they did together to his family. Again, would not be surprised. And then you had a part 2 Diz fan. Thank you again for the super chat. If he isn't and a divorce happens, does he have to go through like ABC, CBS to do a sit down interview for his part? I mean, probably that would be probably what he does, because we've seen this aspect of Harry where he can't let something go. And in addition to that, he wants to always respond to things. And so he has to, let's say when he lost his court case, he couldn't just do a statement. He had to go on the BBC and whine about how nobody in the world wants to pay for a spoiled brat's security, basically, or a spoiled brat prince security. Nobody wants to pay for that. And so he has this incessant need to fight back. And I think some of that, again, comes from how he ended up leaving the royal family and how it went so sideways for him. And that's not making an excuse. I just like to examine people and human behavior and see why they're making particular decisions. And I think so much of Harry's vendetta overall is due to kind of how Meghan riled him up, how he left the royals, how things have not gone well since then. And he has this one aspect of his life where he can control in some ways. And so he constantly fights back. And so I feel like that is what he'll do. What that looks like, I don't know. But if Meghan does something, I mean, she could totally wreck him. She could totally wreck him. And he's given her all the ammunition to do so. Like we've heard endlessly that he is an angry dude. He is bitter. I mean, and we've seen this. And that Meghan has said again in multiple interviews, like through People magazine, that she wishes he could just let his old life go, basically. But it's like, I want to say to Meghan, honey, you forced him to give this up. This was not really at the end of the day his decision. This is a decision you forced upon your husband. You cannot now be mad that sometimes he's like, I really like that old life I had. I kind of don't like this new life. Like, what is going on? You cannot be mad about that because you're the one who forced him to make said decision. Said decision results in X situation. And you cannot be surprised. You cannot be mad when that is the result, because that is the result Meghan set up. If it was truly his choice, he would not be, what is the word I'm looking, yearning for his former life so much. That's, again, my personal opinion. Because it was a decision forced upon him to quote unquote save his family. Well, he saved his family, and yet life still isn't good. So feel like he's constantly trying to fight for that aspect that he lost in some ways. And it just doesn't go very well. It doesn't go very well. Steven, thank you so much for the super chat as well. Polo was dead as he couldn't use family footage. So I don't know quite what you mean here by family footage, but Polo didn't work because it was like a weird mix of things. So there was one aspect of it that was trash television, something you would find on Bravo. Like aspects of that show would really work well on Bravo if they went full force into it. But then also it tried to be somewhat earnest. And those two things don't really mix well. And so the tonal output of polo was very uneven. So you had this one guy who, had a bit of anger issues and would like trash his polo sticks and curse and didn't want to be a part of his, really seemed like the birth of his child or anything like that. And then you had this other part where talking about the history a little bit, not really even that much, polo, and how this one guy is the greatest polo player guy ever. I swear, I like yelled at the screen one time. I was like, we know that. Like they've told us it 12 times, because what I noticed as well is that the series, the way it was set up, is that it regurgitated the same information so much as if it was weekly instead of binge model. Binge model, you don't need to reiterate the same 12 things because it's a binge model. So if you've told us, you only need to tell us once or twice that this one dude is the greatest polo player ever. After that, like, it's just ridiculous. And then the other aspect that I noticed as well is that one of the big stories, which was the guy who fell off his horse, was like in a coma and everything. Well, for the privacy of his family, we didn't cover that. And I understand that, but that was honestly going to be probably the most compelling story out of the entire thing, is a guy who was played polo, got seriously injured, showing the dangers of polo and how he recovered or how he didn't recover. That is actually honestly a much better story than what Harry and Meghan came up with. And they were very, very limited in their appearances, Harry and Meghan. But that wasn't a surprise either. It wasn't really about them. And they showed up like kind of, I almost want to say it was dumb, because especially there was like one bit where we had to show that Meghan spoke a little bit of Spanish. And I'm like, why? Who cares that the woman spoke Spanish? Like, I don't care. And it seemed like just a vanity thing. In particular, like talking about how her favorite day of like one of the favorite things in Argentina was Argentina Day. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But if you're talking about like royal family footage, like some of it I'm sure may have been licensable, but you can't really rely too much on the royal side anyways, because it's not really what you're focused on. They're focused on sort of the finals and these group of polo players. And there were aspects of it that were somewhat interesting and compelling, but again, they failed to see an overall good story, an overall good narrative, and that's kind of where we end up with a bit of the mess when it comes to what we got with polo. So, now that we got a couple of super chats, if we have more, definitely break in. But I did want to talk about this interesting idea I had when it comes to Harry and Meghan and not really seeing them much together this year so far. And it was really, actually, when you think about it, it was front loaded this year. So we saw them together at Invictus doing the like response to like the fires in California, and once in April at the Time magazine event. And we saw them recently in paparazzi pictures with the kids in surfing, but that's about it. And I just thought it was interesting because I just kind of kept thinking to myself, when is the last time we actually saw them together? Because they used to do everything together pretty much. They are salt and pepper. So if you guys see here, starts at about here. We have Invictus all up here pretty much. So that was in February, and then April. And that's kind of it. We don't have their time in California. That should be on here too. But when Getty Images was there, like really, we're getting very few events. And then in the previous year, obviously in August. So I guess we did have a big break between August and February, but they were in Colombia doing a tour. And that's the interesting question too. What happened to a global tour together? Like they were supposed to do one this year and we heard rumors about it. And then we don't get anything. So they're here in Colombia for that thing. We have the ESPY Awards here. They're in Nigeria in May. We have Polo in April, March at South by Southwest. We have Invictus. And then in January, we had the whole Jamaica thing. And then we saw them, let's say, it's kind of interesting to see them a bit more here. Obviously, you have Invictus as well and various things. And they're a bit quieter, I guess you could say, in 2023. But it just feels like for a couple who were so attached at the hip that they're not hanging around each other quite as much or going to their various events together. And I find that sort of enlightening, you could say, because one of the things we've definitely heard, and this has been endlessly repeated, is that they're going down different paths. She's going to be a entrepreneur and he's going to be a philanthropist. And so we see sort of this division that has occurred in their public appearances. And it's not something that, especially when you think about, in addition to Columbia, they had gone and done the CBS thing. Like, I just even feel like we would see them do random bits of things too in the meantime that would be reported on their Archwell website and everything. And we really haven't heard anything about that this year. This year has been sort of, you could say, weirdly quiet in some ways. Now, we do know that they went to Disneyland together and, of course, had really happy family pictures, but you're in Disneyland, so that doesn't really mean anything. And then, and Carol is right as well. And I've noticed this too. Also, Meghan doesn't do paparazzi shots as she has done more on Instagram. Exactly. Meghan's doing less paparazzi shots as well. So we see them less overall in some ways. But we also see them more on Instagram. And when it comes to Instagram, like, we did have the sort of a couple of things they've done, but not a ton in a lot of ways either. Like, we had their whole dad video that Meghan did for Harry, but at the same time, it was kind of weird because, like, half of it was just about showing the kids. So that was this video here, and we saw different things, but, like, some of it was just about the kids and a little bit about him in some ways. So it was just very, very strange in some ways. And so Meghan has been very much focused on herself. And this birthday shot is interesting too, because you don't see anybody. I actually thought we saw her friend here, and we don't really see anybody there. And I imagine Harry's the one who took this picture, but it could honestly, this looks like something a girl would wear. I could be totally mistaken, but this looks like something a girl would wear. This is obviously a girl here. Like, this could have been just a girl's birthday lunch. And I can't help but wonder if the separation, again, that's happening professionally, is sort of being dragged into their personal life as well. Because these are two people who I think fundamentally have nothing in common in a lot of ways. They have made their lives needlessly difficult, like needlessly difficult. All the stuff going on with, you know, Harry separating from his family and everything, all of that adds endless grief. And then you have Harry, who I think is actually trying to make inroads back to his family. And Meghan just doesn't want any part of that. Like, she wants no part of that, because she's like, I want my money and everything. I want, I want as ever and stuff like that. She jumped across the pond to shill, you know, spread. How exciting is that? And so I think in this way, we're seeing a couple who's probably somewhat separated and doing their own thing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that's what most people do. But Harry and Meghan, what they've done, and again, this is always to their discredit, it's the same thing as a PDA. You make your whole public persona basically about being together as a couple and being the greatest love story ever. And then all of a sudden, you're not together anymore. You're not being seen together. It instantly raises questions and red flags, because you've told us, like, your whole public persona is about being together, and you're not together much anymore. You're sort of separate. And then we have everything going on with Netflix and Meghan's podcast and As Ever. And Harry, like, he has to feel left behind in a lot of ways. Not that he's really interested in that, but that he just doesn't have the opportunity really to engage in that way. And he wants, I think, the respect he used to have as a royal, and he just doesn't have that anymore. He's sort of a joke in the industry, and none of it is going well for him. And I imagine that's causing anger on his part. And then you add in the whole collapse of the Sentebale situation. And what's interesting about that is, obviously I have a different perspective than most, but when I look at the Sentebale situation, I feel like what happened was that this thing had been going down for a long time. And it could be that when it comes to Sentebale, there was just no need for it anymore. The people that they were used to help just didn't maybe need their help anymore, or that there just wasn't as many people to serve. Like this does happen where like a charity and its purpose sometimes runs out. That like the technology gets better or a disease is cured or something like that. And there's just like, we don't really have a lot of, smallpox charities because smallpox is not a thing. Not that HIV is not still an issue, but it is sort of an issue in some of that situation too. And so I wonder if that was part of the problem. And so the charity was going under. And Dr. Duca, she went on when she did her Sky News interview. I believe she blamed it all on Harry and Meghan leaving the royal family. There's a reason why donations went down. But you have to remember too, that was also during COVID. So all charities suffered during COVID. Nobody was donating. Nobody was going out. People were hoarding money because they didn't know what the future held and those sorts of things. And so at this point, that's one of the things to consider as well, is that that COVID happened. They couldn't go around and do, let's say, a big charity polo event because everybody was staying inside and the restrictions and stuff. I mean, Harry just started playing polo again like in 2022 and then never did it again. And so you had that situation there to consider. And then what happened as well is that the charity was just losing, I think, money and steam and momentum. And Harry lost interest too. So you have kind of the two things there. The charity itself was suffering due to a variety of issues, COVID, Harry at Mexit, those sorts of things were all issues. And then Harry, I think he lost his focus on the charity as well. And so he kind of came back in, I would guess late 2023, and was like, oh my gosh, this thing is failing. I love this thing, even though I forgot about it. Let's try to fix it. And so they hired a new person, Dr. Sophie. And that went not as well as they were hoping. They were hoping to raise more money and they didn't raise more money. And as Stephen pointed out here, and it was been reported recently as well, is that 4 out of the 5 London employees were made redundant for Sentebale. And although I don't know what their purpose was, but their purpose was fundraising and you're losing 4 out of the 5, that's not good. That's not good because there's going to be more money in Europe and the United States than there is going to be in some corners of Africa. That's just how the case is. And so he was trying to save it. And I think that's where he all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this charity thing again. Like, it's kind of like he forgot. And then all of a sudden it dawned on him that, if you have this charity that you're a part of and you're not working on it, oh my gosh, it might go sideways. Same thing with the business. Like the business leader, he like goes on sabbatical and all of a sudden everything tanks. And he's like, what happened? Well, you took your eye off it. Not that Harry was the sole driver and he shouldn't have been the sole driver. But I think he came in, others came in, tried to fix it, did not go well. And then we had the bust up with the board, which to me, again, I read it as purely this was what happens in business sometimes. And I don't think it looks good necessarily for anyone. And I'm still of the opinion that everybody lost in that scenario. But I think Harry, because of that situation, his mind is now, I think, focused on Africa, on his charities, on what the future looks like there. I don't think his focus is on Netflix, whereas Meghan's focus is on Netflix and as ever and everything. And I think we see two people who have wildly different focuses. And Harry, again, by wanting to go back to the royal family, because I'm sure he's the one who initiated the quote unquote peace talks. And I'm sure he does want them. But the thing is, and I think much to Harry's discredit, he married a woman who does not care about his family, who does not care that his father is perhaps, and this is, being hyperbolic, dying of cancer, and that she could actually help him by helping make amends with his father. Like, think of the callousness of Meghan here. His father has cancer. His sister-in-law had cancer. And yes, Harry is a butt in this scenario. He's an absolute butt, terrible person in this scenario. He is the villain of this scenario. But at the same time, he's allowing his wife to dictate how he interacts with his family to such an extent that he does not see his father. He does not bring his children to see his father. He whines about his security all the time. when I do truly believe for a fact pretty much that nobody is that invested in Harry. And there is just a simple reason for that, which is that he is the spare, William is the heir, and William has 3 heirs now. Harry is sort of redundant. And Harry just can't seem to accept that. But I think Harry uses that too because, and again, this is all about looking at the psychology of the situation and the motivations of human beings. If Harry admits it's not because of security that he can't go see his children, that's because of his wife that he can't go see his father and bring his children to see them. His wife is preventing him from doing that. Then he has to be retrospective on himself and realize that he married a toxic, destructive person. Because if he has to admit he made a mistake, then he has to admit that his family was right, that he was always wrong, that they were only trying to help him, which I think was entirely the case the whole time. When they looked at Harry and goes, hey, maybe you might want to, pump the brakes a little bit and, really try to get to know who this Meghan Markle person is. He didn't take that advice. He told them they were all racists, basically. And now it looks like, I don't know what you would call him exactly, but Harry is the one who really truly damaged his family relationships. He made his father's life needlessly difficult, his grandmother's life needlessly difficult, his grandfather's life needlessly difficult. And that's something Harry will have to live with for the rest of his life. And I think the bitterness, the resentment, and the anger that he directs towards his family in a lot of ways is a defense mechanism because otherwise he'd have to direct it at himself and his wife. And how his wife, in her selfish pursuits, that he, to his discredit, 150,000% decided to follow, destroyed his life. And I think that's where we're sort of kind of at. And so, anyways, that was an interesting tangent that I didn't think I'd go down. But I think that's exceptionally, I think it's true. I think it's 100% true. And I know some people consider that a Harry apologist. No, I'm trying to understand human behavior. It's, as a historian, that's what we do too. We look at people and their motivations and why they're doing particular things because people don't do things in a vacuum. Generally, there are a lot of situations as to why people do things. And some of it, yes, is Harry being Harry, but some of it, because we are all sometimes vulnerable to manipulation. When you are manipulated into something, you make decisions, you make claims and all these sorts of things that you would not have made before, except for the fact that somebody is sort of, I don't want to say forcing, but needlessly pushing you to do X, Y, and Z. And that's where Harry's at. And so I think when we see this separation, I think Harry resents Meghan Markle, the businesswoman. I think Harry resents their life in California in some ways. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I'm sure the kids have fun. The weather's lovely. But he's like, I want to go home sometimes. And my wife doesn't let me go home. And if he goes home, if he really tries to make inroads, his wife will never speak to him again. Or he'll lose his kids. Like these are like the type of situations Harry is facing. And he did this to himself. If he had stood stronger or maybe tried to get to know Meghan Markle a little bit better, he would not be in this situation. But I can't help but think he has a massive amount of rage and he directs it everywhere because if he directs it to where it's, I'm sure he actually feels it, his marriage would fall apart almost instantly. And I like how somebody said when we were talking on our members only live stream recently, that when it comes to Harry and Meghan and their dynamic, it's like they'll be somewhat separated for a long time and people will speculate for a long time and then it'll collapse overnight. And I think that is sort of what we're seeing. They'll limp along, I'm sure, for a couple more years, but especially if Charles takes a downturn, if something else happens in Harry's family that he could have prevented, or not prevented, but that he lost something on, I think that will, again, spurn resentment because I would resent Meghan if I was married to her that I didn't get to see my grandmother the day before she died because they were in London and could have seen and flown up to see Her Majesty. They had a free day and they decided not to go up and see her and she died the next day. I feel like that is a divine slap in Harry's face in some ways and something that he'll resent 100%. I've always said that Harry will come to resent her at some point. And I'm sure that's somewhat already happening. I'm sure the tension is there. Her focus is not on him anymore. Her focus is on her millions, her Hollywood friends, and these sorts of things. And yeah, he gets the high every once in a while from being near her, and they have, like, I think, a weird toxic dynamic, I'm sure. But I feel like when it comes to their future, that we haven't seen them in a year as much together, I feel like in some ways, or as united in some ways, is really fascinating because don't forget, it was last year in August, both times. CBS interview. They could not look more annoyed with each other at times. They could not look more annoyed with each other. And then in August last year as well, when they went to Colombia, you had that interaction where Harry and Meghan, they're like both about to speak. Meghan speaks first, and Harry could not look more annoyed at her. And then he starts to speak, and Meghan snaps her head back around to look at him and gives like an almost dismissive, disgruntled, eye rolling expression to somebody else as she turns her face around. And those happen so close together, which again is somewhat shocking because Meghan's pretty good at masking things. And yeah, they had some good times there, I'm sure, as well. But I think we're starting to see a very mixed bag and a very mixed reaction. And I feel like they're not as united on their projects anymore. I feel like they're diversifying, which again is what couples do sometimes for sure. But when they've made such a fuss about wanting to do every single thing together, we're salt and pepper, we stick together. Look, those trees are entwined, they're us. The moment you stop doing that, everybody notices. And that's what I feel like I've been noticing. So we do have a couple of comments here real quick. Lizzie B gifted 1 Royal News Network membership. Why, thank you so much, Lizzie B. That is so kind of you to do so. And we also have one other. We have Peggy Spungen. Thank you so much for the super chat too here. Meghan will never let Harry make any sort of peace with his family, even with King Charles's cancer. Look at what she did to her own father. Yes, and we already have evidence, guys, at this point that Meghan is not there trying to help Harry make amends with his family. Like, why wouldn't she be helping him make amends? Like going, okay, Harry, what happened to me, that's unfair, but I need to let things go. And there's a lot of wisdom, I think, in letting things go. I almost did a whole video and then I decided to not do that, about how when it comes to particularly the Sentebale situation, I know so many people want Sophie to keep fighting because she's got to fight against the bullying or alleged bullying and everything like that. But I think there's a real wisdom in recognizing that not everything has to be a battle. And sometimes it's just better to let things go. She has control over the charity. What would be the point of pursuing the bullying allegations? You're just wasting the charity's money pursuing charges for yourself, basically. It's not going to help the charity at this point. The only thing that's actually going to help the charity is to work towards actually helping the people or figuring out a new direction for the charity and working on that. Needlessly going down the route of vindication or like retribution or whatever, it's not actually helpful. And I think when it comes to Harry here, and we got a really cute friend to help us make this point, is that it's just sad that Meghan, I mean, how cruel she is. Charles has cancer, and yet, we can't let the kids go see Charles. And again, I feel like Harry in some ways, although I'm sure he does feel this in a lot of ways too, he blames, his father and everything. I'm sure he blames his wife too somewhat. Like, how can he not? Or at some point he will begin to blame her. But again, you have to shield yourself from your own decisions. And I feel like that's what Harry is doing here. Thank you so much, Peggy. Is that he's trying to shield himself mentally, or like for his mental health, the fact that he is the catalyst for the aspect of his life that he doesn't like right now. And Miss Pippa agrees. Say hi, Miss Pippa. Oh, she's a good girl. Uh-huh. Thank you. She's my sweet baby girl. Yes. She's naughty though sometimes. She's naughty, but she's good too. She was hanging out with me on the banky. Okay. Should we do enough cuddling? Sorry. It's just so cute when she cuddles. Mm. Mm. Oh my gosh. Crazy story, guys, about Miss Pippa. So we were walking last night and we do have spiders in our areas. And we were walking, and there was like this big spider walking across the path kind of in front of us. And Pippa walked, and the spider, it's kind of one of those jumping ones, and it literally jumped on her back leg and hung on there for a second before she kind of felt it. And I'm like, and I didn't see the spider move after it jumped. I'm like, is it on her? It was on her leg. And then just kind of like went off, and I'm like, okay. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Rebel Lucy Cat says, at the end he will blame her for all of it. Like her, he has no self-awareness or accountability. None. Yeah, I think he will blame her at some point. And that'll be the end of it, I think, is he'll come to massively, massively resent and hate her. And he 100% played a role here. He is supposed to be, and I granted this for some is maybe an antiquated notion, but as the man of the house, he's supposed to be the leader. And he let his wife lead. And look where he ended up. He let her make all the decisions. Why are they in California? She wants to be there. Why are they in Montecito? She wants to be there. Why are they Why do they have a deal with Netflix? She wanted one. Why do they have a deal with Spotify? She wanted one. She wanted the deal with Lemonada. She wanted as ever. Everything has been about her and very little about him. I feel like he has been totally a beta male in this situation. It's so funny when Meghan stans go, "Oh, you just like Harry." I'm like, no, no, no. He's like this beta male, like sniveling coward, basically. He won't stand up for himself. He won't stand up for his family. And he blames everybody else instead of taking accountability for his actions. He allowed himself to be led, and he has no one to blame but himself and his wife too, because, again, she made the decisions, but he allowed her to make the decisions. Not that he forces himself or anything like that, but you see a couple where there's only one power in that dynamic, and it's her. He is allowed to sort of be the you could call it I don't know what you would call it. The, like, knight in shining armor figure. She kinda lets him play act that, but she really doesn't believe it for him, and she winds him up and to, see him enact that. But when it comes to having the real power in their relationship, it's her, and he's given her that, and this is a result. This is a result. Like it or hate the idea of the man leading the home, but that can go sideways too. Nobody's perfect. But he could have taken leadership here and he let his wife do all the leading. And that's on him. That's on him. Oh, Katie Forthesai said I would have literally had a heart attack. Yeah, it was kind of like, what? Yeah, I don't know. Catwoman says what kind of spider? I don't know, but it was pretty big. It was on her leg, and it just kind of not flopped off, but it was like, "Oh, you're moving. Never mind." I don't think it bit her. She didn't act like it hurt or anything, so I think she was just like she could just tell, like, it was on her and that she was just like, "Oh, this is a little persnickety." But it was oh, man, I've never seen that before. Never seen that before. Yeah, we got some big spiders, oh my gosh, guys, there's a corn spider on one of my neighbors', like, bushes. It's like this big. I'm not even joking. Like, it's this big. It's like this long. It's huge. Like, you look at it, and the spider is quite impressive too, if you look it up. You would think this spider is fake. It's so big. Like, I walked by and I was like, I could fully see all of it. And I'm like, this is so weird. Very scary though. A little scary. Look a little scary. Oh, Joanne says you look very pretty today. Why, thank you. Yes, I have to do my special stage makeup for my live stream because it gives me it feels like I have an airbrushed effect on, but it's just really good foundation that I feel like looks caked on. But honestly, I understand they cake on for news anchors too, and you understand why because I have basically the same setup, except my lens is 1,000 times better, and it really picks up a lot of inconsistencies, and so I was doing my normal makeup, and I was like, "Oh, this ain't working anymore." Yeah, so anyways, Georgie says, "In my opinion, they play Holy Matrimony for the Christmas special, and then in 2026, there'll be a divorce." Yeah, they definitely could show the kids in the Christmas special, because, I mean, like, honestly, what what would they offer? what would they offer? Like, I mean, she doesn't host anybody for Christmas. Like, she has one family member she speaks to, and that's her mother. Maybe still her, like, niece or whatever. I don't know what happened to that relationship, but so Evelyn, says, "Which foundation?" So it's, the Tom Ford Blurring Matte Foundation, I think it was. I got it for sale at the cosmetic store in London. So, or in the Bicester Village. So I like the cosmetics company store. They do have them here in the United States. They sell like overstock or like discontinued makeup from like Tom Ford, Bobbi Brown, MAC, Estee Lauder, a couple others. There's similar stores, but I can't remember the names of them because I've only really seen the cosmetic company stores. Anyways, so I got it for sale there. Uh, and I thought I would try it on my video, and I was like, oh my gosh, it actually looks 1,000 times better. So I feel like I look sort of strange and overly made up in person, but you got to do it for the cameras sometimes, guys. So, anyway, but the other big news, obviously, of this kind of weekend, you could say, is Catherine and William's new home. So I'm trying to find the Sun article here real quick. Apparently, there's been a murder somewhere in the UK. Cops hunt killer after woman murdered in horror attack outside care home. So hopefully that gets resolved, but I need to find the article about Catherine and William moving. And this was not a residence I was familiar with at all. And so I was really surprised to see that we have a new option here. And it's going to be apparently their forever home. And so I have like interesting thoughts about that for sure, just because, you know, you kind of want them to be in Buckingham Palace. You kind of do. So let's go ahead and move over to this Sun piece. So I was unfamiliar with this, but they are moving to an 8-bedroom forever home in Windsor as they plan a fresh start after Princess's cancer treatment. Unlike Harry and Meghan, Wills and Kate are funding all renovations themselves and will have no live-in staff. This continues from Adelaide Cottage. And so this is going to be their new place. And it's an 8-bedroom home called Forest Lodge, nestled in Great Windsor Park. And they will remain there even when William becomes king. So this is the home right here. In some ways, it doesn't look like super duper impressive, to be quite honest. And I mean, it does and it doesn't. It's like so hard without like actually being there and like seeing what the size of everything is, like where the rooms are and everything. But obviously, it's a nice little place. You got some green lawns. It looks like we'll do like a look at it from overview and a map, but you can see this had been previously rented before. So it says insiders are saying they're hoping for a fresh start after a difficult time at Adelaide Cottage, during which Queen Elizabeth died and Kate and Charles were diagnosed with cancer. It is the ideal pad for their young family and far removed from Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. They are paying for the move and rent at no extra cost to the taxpayer, it is understood. And unlike Harry and Meghan, when they splash £2.4 million of taxpayers' money on Frogmore Cottage, Wills and Kate are funding all renovations themselves and will have no live-in staff. So I think this is very, very good, very, very exciting to see. And of course, it says the Sussexes later paid back the money before being evicted by King Charles. So I do want to point out here, because this has always been my opinion, is that Charles is the one who repaid the taxpayer money, the £2.4 million, because I don't think Harry and Meghan had it at the time, which is why he could evict them. I think he covered the costs. And so when he evicted them, Harry and Meghan really had no choice but to leave. And that is just, again, my personal thought. That's the only money I think he's ever given them post-Mexit, was to just get that done and get everything to move on. Because I don't think they had that level of cash to just like give out at the time. So just something interesting there to consider. And it says planning applications seen by the Sun show that work has already started on minor internal and external renovations at the 328-year-old grade 2 listed lodge. And the Waleses aim to be in by Christmas. The home offers spectacular views, and football mad William will be able to see Wembley Arch from his bedroom window. and Kate has already been spotted picking new furniture to kit out the new abode, including a 24-seater table. And I always thought like Adelaide Cottage is very, very small. So I always thought Adelaide Cottage was always like a short little stint, that they were not going to stay there forever, that it was only going to be a short amount of time they were there. It was just it seemed too small. 4 bedrooms, like, and I know 4 bedrooms for some people that's like a lot in a home. But when you're talking about they had 3 kids, so every bedroom was basically taken. So they couldn't host anybody. And not that they would host, like, her family has plenty of money and stuff like that. But honestly, guys, her family, like, she would go and stay at her family's house. She would go stay at they would stay at her house. So I think there was a lot of like they invite people into their home and they weren't able to do that. Like, even just think, for example, I'm sure Carol Middleton spent a lot of time at their home, and she may have had to sleep weirdly. Like, they might have had 2 of the kids share a room for a period of time, but Carol might have had to sleep on the couch so she could just be there for her daughter. I mean, I'm sure there's a small house somewhere that she could stay in. So I'm sure she wasn't too far, but after a surgery like that and stuff like that, you need somebody to help you a lot. And I'm sure there's some bad memories in that house. I don't blame them for wanting to move and go somewhere else in some ways. And obviously not everybody has that option. I understand that, but the reality of life always is, guys, is that there will be people who are rich and people who are poor and people in the middle. That's just life. I feel like I hate it when people criticize people for having money. Sometimes it's like, yeah, and I'm sorry you don't, but like there's nothing sometimes we can do to fix that. Like, there's just kind of the, the world has always been, there's been people with money and people without. Like, that's just life. And I just hate that kind of annoying thing people go down sometimes. And so they are able to move, and it's not costing the taxpayers anything extra. And they have a place where maybe they're going to be staying there full time. Now, I feel like it's still a little modest for a king and queen. I kind of hope they do eventually move into Windsor Castle. I think that would be nice, but I understand as well. So Diz fan asks here, seems like Catherine and William are looking to make Buckingham Palace, Kensington, and Windsor Castle for work use only. Yes. And obviously King Charles lives in Clarence House, which I'm sure is quite nice and quite large. I don't know the exact dimensions, but from the outside and from what I can see from the, even though there's big walls separating me, it looks fairly large. But I mean, Charles has always been in the in the vein of that he wants to stay at Clarence House. And so he's going to stay there. Buckingham Palace is going to become just a working location. So is Windsor Castle. And I just find that to be a bit of a letdown in Kensington Palace too. Like, they still will have their home base at Kensington Palace for when they're in London. I mean, it could change if Charles passes away, and I don't know if William liked Clarence House or not. He may decide to, for convenience sake, to move to Clarence House, but I don't know if that's feasible or not. I don't know if there's like outdoor space. And there's a little bit in in Kensington Palace for sure. Like, there's where the helipad lands and those sorts of things. So there is a little bit of space for outdoor, but I'm sure they have more space there. But yeah, it's a little bit kind of disappointing that everything is just going to be working palaces only. I do have to say I'm a little sad by that, because I do like the idea. We do have a lot of royals who do live in palaces still. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, because that is just part of the deal, really. I understand if, let's say, when it comes to Kensington Palace, obviously there's tourists there all the time and people tour the palace all the time. So I understand maybe living somewhere else. I understand Buckingham Palace would be obnoxious because obviously everybody's looking at it all the time and it's a working palace. So lots going on. But I would love to see them actually live in Windsor Castle when he becomes king. I feel like it's sort of kind of important for you to somewhat live in an actual palace. Just my thought. Because I feel like sometimes what I worry about William is that he's almost overcorrecting. So he so wants to have the monarchy be approachable that in the process, it might lose some of its luster, because part of the deal with being royalty is that you are separate. That's the whole reason you're royalty, is that you're different. And if you minimize those differences to such an extreme that you just look like the average guy just with a title, then you actually undermine the foundation of what you're trying to say. By like saving it by trying to pull back so much, you might lose it in the process because you overcorrected. So I feel like Charles is mostly keeping to sort of Queen Elizabeth standards in many ways. And so he's almost, still, I would argue, kind of leaning towards the past a little bit too much. I mean, the blunders this week with Buckingham Palace, which we should get into too, with the PR, are just inexcusable in this day and age. Like, seriously, how did you let like an intern use AI to come up with 75 facts about Princess Anne and have nobody look it over, especially when it gives her husband 2 children that he did not have, gives them names. I think their names were Tom and Amy. Tom and Amy Lawrence. Step on up. You notice that it's a lot like Tim and Anne. And those type of things happen, and they shouldn't be happening. I feel like the website for Buckingham Palace is slow and clunky. I think it's of a bygone era. I feel like the Brits should take a note from particularly the Danes. I think the Danes have an excellent website. I think the Swedes have a very good website. So the Norwegians. I think of the 3, though, I'm like Danes, Swedes, Norwegians. And they have pictures, editorial pictures you can take from them. They have updates and those sorts of things. And the Brits are just super weird. And I understand some of it comes from security and everything, but they are slow and clunky on the website. I think they should do more there rather than William sort of overcorrecting. Because I think somebody said here too, Clifford, the chat moved. He's going to get rid of the mystique of the BRF. Yes, and that's the thing that keeps the BRF there, is the mystique of it. If you lose the mystique, you lose the whole thing. You have to keep it. And so I think it's lovely that they have a place that's kind of theirs and more like homey and stuff. I'm fully in support of that. But even if it's more for appearance's sake rather than in reality, I think his home when he's king should be Windsor Castle. If he wants something that's a little bit separate, yeah, because you have to be able to keep everything so on the nose in some ways. Like, you have to be able to keep things together. Otherwise, I think William's going to overcorrect. I think William's going to overcorrect to the detriment of it. And Godzilla Manstrip says, "Oh my goodness, so happy. I didn't think you'd do a Saturday live stream." Yeah, I just thought I'd do it now because we have so much coming out and it's like hard to get to everything. But we will again be, I'm going to be reorienting it, I think. But it's a good just to have a little bit of a break. It feels nice. So, well, let's keep going down this and then we can speak a little bit more as well about sort of the PR blunders we had this week. So, if you said a source close to the Wales has told The Sun last night Windsor has become their home. However, over the last few years, while they lived in Adelaide Cottage, there have been some really difficult times. Moving gives them an opportunity for a fresh start and a new chapter, an opportunity to leave some of the more unhappy memories behind. This is a move for the long term. They see it as their forever home. The Sun understands the move from Kensington Palace in London to Adelaide Cottage 3 years ago was partly designed to test life in Windsor and see if it worked for them as a family. So that's kind of smart. So they tested it in a place that didn't really need a lot of upkeep. Would have been funny if they stayed at Frogmore Cottage. That would have been really funny. But anyways, and see if everything worked. And if they liked it, they would move to a more permanent situation. And that's what people do sometimes is, they rent for like a year and see where they want to live within a city or something, or see if it works. Like, people do that. That is a relatively normal thing. So yeah, they have settled in the Berkshire town with their children. They're happy at Lambert Brook School, a few miles away. Instead, say Windsor location allows Wills and Kate to be as hands-on as possible as parents while balancing royal family commitments. They have been very keen to join their children on school runs, despite retaining happy memories at Adelaide Cottage, which is 4 miles from their new home. The past 3 years have been incredibly difficult. Obviously, the death of the Queen and Charles's cancer and Catherine's cancer as well. So we can reveal, the Sun says, that planning permission for modest internal and external renovations for Forest Lodge were lodged with the council in June. Documents show it requires new doors and windows, stripping out of internal walls, renovating ceilings and new floors, but there are no plans for any demolition or new outbuildings. The freehold is owned by the king in care of the Crown Estate. The most recent tenants have bought a new property and moved out. Forest Lodge was last renovated in 2001 at the cost of £1.5 million. At the time, it was valued at £5.5 million, but according to a house price indication, entices it would be worth around £16 million if put on the open market. Media were allowed inside Forest Lodge to capture images of the renovations and restoration 24 years ago. It revealed the original stonework, elaborate plaster, cornices, ceiling decorations, marble fireplaces, Venetian windows, and half-barrel vaulted ceilings. So it went on the rental market in 2001 for £15,000 a month. Planning applications from the time showed 3 stables were built on the site and existing garages were changed into 2 semi-detached houses. 2 replacement garages were also constructed. The land comes with several cottages, a large pond, and a tennis court. Perfect for Catherine. She loves her tennis. It was listed as grade 2 status in 1972, and the official record shows it boasts a cellar built in Flemish bond red brick, original slate roof, 6 chimneys, 9 bay windows, and an entrance hall leading to a central drawing room. The home is an upgrade from the Adelaide Cottage, but still half the size of Andrew's 31-room Royal Lodge. Both are nestled in the heart of the 4,800-acre Great Park. So they will have lived in 3 properties in 3 years. Forest Lodge is 10 minutes closer to the kids' school. The family still have Abner Hall in Norfolk. And then the Kensington Palace did basically confirm, although they didn't confirm they were moving to this home. It's very careful in its wording here. The Wales's family will move house later this year. So highly likely it is Forest Lodge, but they are also careful to say they're just moving house. And so I will show you guys here where it is on. Oh, so we have here when we do Google, let's see if we can go visit. All right. So if we want a little bit of the inside look here, we can check out. This is from Getty Images. So there's a little bit of the land here. And so we can see a little bit of the inside. Obviously, really high ceilings here. This might be, let's say, the entrance to the home, maybe. So they had pulled all the floors out, were redoing everything. It says what I'm curious if it says what's actually in this room. It doesn't. So, but this gives you an idea of what's inside the home a little bit and the size of the home from out here. And when it comes to the maps, because I always wonder, okay, what does it look like on the map? Because that's kind of important here. So, okay. All right. It found it last night, but now it's being persnickety. What is it called? Okay. So we got Rail Lodge. There we go. Okay. So guys, this is from Google Maps. So this is the home right here, Forest Lodge. These are some of the outbuildings. So yeah, no staff will live with them, but I imagine we'll have some staff living out here in addition to security. There's the tennis court. There's the pond. I'm sure if they wanted to put in a pool, that would be an option. We have some outbuildings out here. It looks like these were pads for like agriculture. So they might be able to have obviously quite a bit of a garden. We got more of this out here. So lovely little area for sure. And obviously, given that, although I guess it'll be interesting to see if they cut off this Lime Avenue, or if there's just like just a massive gate down here. I'm sure there'll be massive fencing put up and those sorts of things to keep it secure. But if you're wondering where Royal Lodge is, it's right over here. So Royal Lodge, and then Catherine Williams' new place is over here. So they're fairly close. You just want to get an idea of the size of Andrew's home. There you go. So at All Saints Chapel, this is where Princess Beatrice got married. So that's fun. So we'll pull it back. And if you're wondering where Windsor is and compared to here, Windsor Castle is right up here. So quite a bit of ways. So it's the Catherine Williams' new home. At least it looks quite a bit of ways on the map. It's probably not that long. And when it comes to Frogmore Cottage, that was right here. So there is Frogmore Cottage, which honestly looks bigger than Catherine Williams' new place, to be honest. And then we also had Adelaide Cottage, which was right here. See, definitely a small little place. It didn't look like it had much in terms of like 2 stories or something. And then the Frogmore house is here. So this is where Meghan thought her and Harry can move to, allegedly. And then you have the Royal Mausoleum, you have some Gothic ruins, those sorts of things. So, and then of course, Windsor Castle itself. I understand them not wanting to live there, but at the same time, I really do hope William at least somewhat lives there when he becomes king, because I think it'll just be a little bit of a bummer if they don't live there. So, guys, I hope that kind of helps you maybe orient a smidge. But yeah, definitely a big change for sure. Oh, there's a Magna Carta memorial. That's cool. Cool. Royal site of the signing of the Magna Carta. Awesome. Okay, sorry. We're getting distracted by the map. And then Heathrow Airport is right over there. So it'll be interesting to know if they get less, obviously, of flyovers. So that'll be entertaining. Because yeah, the planes do fly right over. They do. So lots of opportunities for them. And I think it's great. So Princess Goose asks, is it further or closer to Clarence House? It is way far away from Clarence House. So if you're curious where Clarence House is, so let's go ahead and let's see if we can find it here. So it is right. Clarence House is right next to Buckingham Palace. So you're actually in sort of the heart of London. So there's Buckingham Palace right here, and Clarence House is right here. So it's this one. This is Lancaster House. So I can definitely see where, and you walk right here. So I walk, when I'm in London, guys, I walk down the street like the mall, all the time. And there's not much, let's say, green space for children to have fun in, maybe somewhat here, but Lancaster House is like an event space. They hold a lot of events there. They actually let people film there. And so I feel like, and this is St. James's Palace right here. So this is St. James's Palace. So Clarence House. So this is all kind of, I would argue, most of this is Palace Complex, basically, an extended part of the Palace Conquest. And then obviously Buckingham Palace is here. I understand. I mean, obviously you have the gardens, but you have people touring. There's always I can even push it. You can see people, not many, it doesn't seem like, but it might be just hard to tell. But, there's people hanging out around there. And so I can understand not wanting to live there, especially because it's a working place. But just as an FYI, if you are in London ever, especially around kind of the close of the day, if you actually hang out around here, you might see Charles, because he actually drives. He has this car drive him from Buckingham Palace to Clarence House over here. So I've seen that drive a couple of times. So just as an awareness. And if you're curious too, Big Ben and Westminster Abbey are right over here. Just to orient yourself. And then the Tower of London, let's see. How far away is it? It's not too far. Is it down here? We have Embankment. No. And then there's the Tower of London down here. Tower of London's pretty far away from where most of the yeah, so you have Tower Bridge down here. So it's pretty far. St. Paul's is over here. So if your British Museum's up here, highly recommend. And then like Harrods and stuff, and Kensington Palace is over here. So Kensington Palace is a big complex. Harrods is down here. Um, Paddington's up here, Paddington Station, if you're curious. So, anyways, I hope that orients you just a little bit. Just a little bit. So, anyways, I- um, so it's just kind of sad, I think, that we won't have a royal in a castle. Just need that a little bit. In my very, very humble opinion. So, um, the other interesting thing we wanted to talk about, what was the idea? Now I can't remember. Oh, the Buckingham Palace screw ups this week. So I mentioned it in a video, but it's probably worth going over again. Is that Buckingham Palace sent out and posted a list saying 75 things you didn't know about Princess Anne, who was turning 75. A cute little bit. And so I can't remember which number it was, but one of them and other royal commentators picked up on it because I remember because other people had seen the list first and they were like, "Oh, that's wrong." And I was like, "Yeah, I think that is wrong. I didn't think he had kids." And it said that Timothy Lawrence, so the husband of Princess Anne, and they've been married since the early 90s, I think it is, that he had two children before their marriage. And so she was the stepmother to his two children, Tom and Amy. And I'm like, "Oh, that's weird." And they're like, "That's totally false." And then Buckingham Palace had to take it down because it was false. And you just gotta wonder, so how in the heck did that happen? And what was going on? So I don't know fully, but somebody has suggested AI, which I think 100% could be the possibility that some intern just told AI to pull up a list of 75 facts about Princess Anne. And the thing is, AI is helpful, but it's not infallible. And so, like, it can help you, but it doesn't replace actually looking through and doing it yourself. Like, you can like, AI is there as a helpful tool, but doesn't replace a person physically doing something. So, this whoever this was allowed this list. Nobody double checked it and posted it. And then other people were looking through the list of, oh, fun things. And then they're like, but that's wrong. And Buckingham Palace is like, oh crap, and took it down. We got no response from this. But this is, I would argue, and I feel like now I can say more definitively, the second major screw up from Buckingham Palace this year. Second major PR screw up, comms screw up, whichever department this resides in, this was a screw up. And so, oh, somebody said that I think Tom has nieces and nephews. They could be Tom and Amy. It would be weird if their names were Tom and Laura, Queen Camilla's children. Yeah. But again, either way, it's weird. So they put that information out there. Buckingham Palace retracted it. And then, so like, what was the other major script this year? So when it comes to Royal Ascot, my understanding is that it's Buckingham Palace that gives the information to Ascot on who is in what carriage. And of course, this year it went out that Catherine was going to be in one of the carriages when I believe she had already pulled out. I said this in a video, but I feel like people didn't totally listen. But my argument was in the video about Catherine is that I'm pretty positive she had already said the day before, or at least in a good time period, that, hey, I'm not going to attend this event. And we sort of kind of know this because William, when it came to giving out the trophy, William was the only one listening. Catherine wasn't listed with him, and that was the only day William attended, was the day he gave out the trophy. So if Catherine was always going to be there and pulled out last minute, she would have been on that list too, but she was removed. But somebody, and I feel like we can more now say between Buckingham Palace and Royal Ascot, really screwed up. And that resulted in needless speculation. No speculation about Catherine's health should have existed because she is smart enough, and I feel like her team is smart enough to go, hey, I know like the weather's going to not be great. It's going to be really hot. I just don't feel comfortable standing in the grass. Like, I think I can do it, but it's been a long week. So it's like, let's just, or one of the kids is sick or something. And it's just like, it's a lot. And I think because of her abdominal surgery, there's a lot of recovery I'm sure she's still doing with that, and she made the decision, and I'm sure there's some times where something is last minute, but I feel like they must have gotten probably pretty good guys at trying not to make things last minute. Like, I'm sure it is they try super duper hard to not make sure something happens last minute, and I'm sure she tries to too, because I think she's an incredibly conscientious person, and I feel like she would not want to make people kind of stress about something they don't need to stress about. So I'm sure they were told 24 hours ahead of time she wasn't going, and yet the list went out with her anyways on it when it comes to the carriages. And I feel like now we have issues with Buckingham Palace. I think there's a PR issue in Buckingham Palace, or a communications issue. These are two very serious blunders. And these are blunders should not have happened. There are ways to avoid this. And like, especially when it comes to Catherine, raising speculation about her health is sort of inexcusable to me. As a comms team, your job is to make sure your principal is safe and under as less stress as possible the entire time, especially someone like Catherine who struggled with cancer. So, like, what are you doing? And I feel like with these combined, I feel like I can say more definitively than before, I think there's a comms issue in Buckingham Palace that needs to be addressed. These You should not be having these issues. These should not be something that's damaging and making things more difficult and making you look frankly stupid. You frankly look stupid. And so it's just one of those things where I'm like, ah, but I feel like we know a bit more now, and I feel like that's good of where the issue lied. Now, again, I will say that Kensington Palace's job was probably to, especially if they know Buckingham Palace has dropped the ball before, is to kind of bug Buckingham Palace. So yes, Cuggy says Catherine doesn't fall under Kensington Palace, not Buckingham Palace. Doesn't Catherine fall under Kensington? Yes, but they're supposed to work together. If you can't have two different things spouting different, like, they are separate, but they have to work together. And so if the Kensington Palace team told Buckingham Palace something and they didn't complete it, that's on Buckingham Palace. And so although mistakes happen, as Clifford said, mistakes happen though, which is true. But I feel like now we have two things that should not have happened. Sorry. We have two things that should not have happened. And there were ways to avoid this, especially I feel like for Catherine. And some of this is on Kensington Palace saying to Buckingham Palace, hey, call us, double check, make sure every time Catherine is supposed to be at something, we need to make sure everything's good. Make sure, double check with us. Is she coming? That should have been part of the protocol. I don't know if it was skipped. I don't know who dropped the ball, but somebody did. And again, I know this sounds like, well, mistakes happen and stuff like that. Sure. But at this higher level, you need to have multiple kind of safeguards in place to avoid these type of situations. Now, you can't control it if your principal goes off script. So, if, for example, Harry and Meghan, I feel like Harry and Meghan, part of their problem for their PR team is that they don't keep to the script. And so they kind of go off. You can't control that, but these were fully controllable things, and fully, like, double check. Hey, before we post a list, is Catherine coming? No. Oh yeah, crap. We had the other carriage list. I forgot about that. If you have those kind of safeguards in place, you should have very minimal issues. That we had issues is really, 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 really critical here. And let's see. Gretchen the First said Kenzie Schofield interviewed Dickie Arbiter, who worked for Queen Elizabeth and now King Charles. He said that back in the day, the carriage list only went out once people were in the carriages. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on, but somebody is dropping the ball somewhere. Somebody is. I don't know who that person is, but Buckingham Palace needs to kind of get their act together. They do. They do. So I think that's something that definitely needs to be addressed. 100% needs to be addressed. And the other fault I thought when the original Ascot thing happened earlier this year is that, well, it just looks like Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace communications teams aren't communicating, and that's a bad look too. So no matter what happens, somebody dropped the ball, everybody started looking bad. And so you really have to, like, these are the type of people at this high of level where you should not be having these like amateur level mistakes. And again, it goes back to, and I say this to self, like let's say for a while I had a shop mine. Sometimes I wasn't as fast as getting product out to people as I should have been when it came to my shirts. Recollections may vary. And so now I do have a different company that does it now, but like it's only me. So when Meghan, it takes her so long to get stock out, it's sort of like she should not be having those levels of mistakes. So if I was representing somebody local in my community and it was only me, you kind of have I feel like more of a cushion because you're more of an amateur. It's a small market. You're only yourself, so you don't have as many like safeguards in place. You could have multiple people, interns, lower level PR people, assistants. You have multiple people who can be like, "Hey, wait, let's double check something before posting." So this is sort of inexcusable. So that's just my thought there. And it is much to do about nothing. Well, Clyde says here, much to do about nothing. How many of us had to pull out something at the last minute, no matter how what's been sent out? It's normal. So the thing is, though, it wasn't normal because they had a list already that they knew of the carriages. So it did not take them long to fix it because I think they had the correct list all along. The wrong one got posted. But we do know Catherine wasn't listed as giving out the trophy with William. And I think it is like the Prince and Princess of Wales award. And so she's usually listed. So I imagine, and again, this is a situation where to avoid speculation about your health, the last thing you want to do, unless it's absolutely necessary, is last minute cancel an event. So if an event is announced, we know that it is definitive. Like we didn't know she was attending. And what we've generally gotten from Catherine at this point, which I feel like is smart, is Kensington Palace saying, yes, Catherine is attending X. And we did not get that. So again, to me, I feel like Catherine probably pulled out a day or two before because again, she doesn't want people to be talking about her health if she can help it. So she pulled out a day or two before and somebody dropped the ball. I don't know again who that person is, but if I was Catherine, I would work as hard as I can to death to avoid a last minute pullout of something. I feel like we usually get announcements the day before and that's pretty solid. But the Ascot thing was just, it should not have happened, I think, in my personal opinion. Disfan, great question. I was meaning to get back to you and then I got distracted. Did you see the PR blunder with Queen Camilla and the yacht? Yeah, that's another sort of blunder thing. It was funny though, because one of the Sussex squad members goes, well, what about Catherine and William in a yacht? I'm like, well, we got no pictures and no definitive evidence. So unless you got it and I haven't seen it, I'm just not going to go with it at this point. I don't think I ever got a response to that. Anyways, it does look a little weird because there was an instance too where Camilla and Charles, I think they had like, I can't remember if it was just a trip or if they tacked it on to something else and they went to like a wellness retreat or something in India. That's just not a great look. And I don't feel like the yacht is a great look either. She went by herself. I feel like Charles and Camilla are very old school aristocrats in that they spend a lot of time apart. So he has Highgrove and she has her own country estate too. And they go to their own separate country estates. It's very aristocratic. And I feel like in some ways, Catherine and William, and I feel like most of the rest of the royals, to be quite honest, I don't feel like I see anybody else doing it in this way. I feel like most everybody like takes vacations together like a normal couple. I feel like Charles and Camilla don't really. I understand sometimes you need to probably vacation to get away from your spouse, but hopefully not too often. Anyways, so she was on a Tory, like a politician Tory yacht. And so that was just not, I don't think in particular, a great move because it looked a little bit political. You can't totally avoid the politics, but that did look a little political. And so, yeah, it's just not a great PR look in my opinion. Let's see if we can find it here real quick. So, of course, the websites being some of these websites, guys, with all the ads and gunk are so funky. Okay, so there's Camilla on the yacht. Sunshine aboard the Zenobia, which is a billionaire Tory donor. So, I mean, I'm sure it was quite nice, this yacht, whatever it was. There she is again, but um not a great look either, because again, it looks a little bit like politics, but the and there's the yacht overall. I mean, very cool. This is the time of year. I mean, the Dutch are getting a lot of flack for their holiday home in Greece right now as well. So I follow a guy who kind of complains about he calls him the holiday king. So I always find that really interesting. I've gotten on some of like the Spanish stuff. I get a decent amount anymore for on X, the Dutch stuff. I'd like to get more of the Norwegian stuff because I would really like to do like a full deep dive, maybe multi-episode series on Marius. And so I know somebody asked earlier about the Marius situation. At this point, we don't know what charges the prosecutor is going to pursue. So at this point, we're kind of in a wait and see approach until we kind of get those updated sort of numbers. But Metamarit and Hakan were recently down under with Ingrid Alexander. And there was actually a report which was sort of interesting. It was from a blind item. And I do not put, guys, a lot of stock on blind items. But in this instance, sadly, I would not be surprised if this is somewhat the case. And again, I feel like this is why we need a full deep dive, because I feel like the Norwegian situation is so incredibly important to the future of all monarchies, because I feel like it's going to crash and burn. I feel like we have a lot of problems, and it's not that you can remove the current king and get rid of the scandal like you could in Spain and Belgium. The future royals are the scandal. So we have Hakan, who married Metamarit, and they raised together, to a certain extent, Marius. And Marius, I'm sure, influenced his younger siblings. And Marius has issues with drugs, violence towards women. And the blind item says that Ingrid Alexandra basically likes to party and is known to dabble in cocaine. No idea if any of that is true. No clue at all, guys. But her brother is a known drug user. He has invited literal criminals into their home, like Hell's Angels. He had wild parties at their home. And the siblings appeared fairly close, which I thought was super cute at the time. But now that we know this separate side, we also have this question of, what are these kids going to do? Like, what does the future look like for them? Are, like, Magnus, is he going to have issues? Is Ingrid Alexandra going to have issues? Hakan and Metamarit, like, they can. I know some people are like, well, you can't blame them for the child. It's like, you kind of sort of can, guys. Not like fully, because obviously adults make their own decisions. But he was raised by them in their home. And he had parties in their home. They were aware of his tendencies. They were told by the women he dated that, and in one instance, one of the women's mothers went up to them and told them, hey, he's doing X, Y, and Z. Marius was having a violent incident with one of his girlfriends on the royal yacht, and Metamarit had to go and calm it down. You can't tell me they did not know the guy had problems. And they swept it under the rug. I think they indulged him for years. And it just blew up in their face. And I'm sorry, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Metamarit was always rumored to have been dabbled in drugs as well. Her ex-boyfriend, the father of Marius, went to prison for drug dealing, I believe it was. So you can argue, and this happens in all royal families as well, a bad element there in Norway. An element that has been indulged, has been covered up, and it's just I think really, really unfortunate. because this is the future. And again, I would not be surprised. And like, as soon as the stuff about Marius came out, I just immediately wondered, what did he expose his younger siblings to? What were they up to? Uh, what did they indulge in together? Um, yeah. So it's a bad situation, I feel like. I mean, Clyde says Marius sounds like Harry. No, he's worse. Marius is much, 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 much worse. And so yeah. And sometimes you have to make the hard decisions. Josie says King Felipe is a brick wall. Don't play with him. He stripped his sister Infantis of Christina of her title as Duchess of Palma Mallorca because of her husband. Yeah, good for him. Good for him. Oh, Angela has been a member for 21 months. Why, thank you so much, Angela. I appreciate that. Rebel Lucy Cat says, agreed, Brittany. It's so much more important to raise kids correctly when they all have so much responsibility. Yeah. And I think Marius was probably somewhat more indulged because he wasn't royal and there was an element where they felt bad. But like kind of much like Meghan Markle, I think because of Marius, some royal families will think twice about a single mom marrying in. And I still do think it's so cool that Metamara did marry in with a child, being a single mom. I think that's really cool because, sometimes you're a widow or sometimes, things didn't work out or something like that. And I think that doesn't mean necessarily that you're a bad person, but I think because and this is why I want to do a deep dive, is that there is so much more, I think, to the story because there was so much more talk at the time of their marriage about Metamara's past with drugs, about the people she hung around with, the criminals. And we see this again continue into the present now. We see this continue into the present. So it wasn't like she had a past and left it behind. It seems like it's kind of translated through. And so I feel like that is like really concerning to me. That's really, really concerning to me. And so that's just, yeah, that's what I gotta say. It was one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh. All right. Ritz says, thank you so much. Loved Brittany's interview with Andrew Lowney. Kenzie Schofield also did an interview, but would not let him talk. Oof. Love her, but she does that a lot. Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of people before, and I did it mostly for like print pieces. So maybe I'm just not as kind of do it the same way because the one time I had a woman who I asked one question to and talked for like 45 minutes and I could not get her to stop talking. I basically had to tell her at some point my computer was about to die because I was having it translate the conversation, or not translate, but dictate the conversation. And I was like, oh gosh, please make it stop. What she was saying was super duper interesting, but I was just like I could not get her to stop. So, but I have always been of like, I want them to say as much as possible because then I would have more to write. So I guess that translates into my interviews now. I don't know. So anyways, yeah, and I noticed this a lot when it comes to Andrew. I highly recommend Andrew's book, Andrew Lowney's book. I feel like it's super interesting because Babette says, I agree, Kenzie made it all about Meghan. It didn't let Andrew speak. And I noticed that as well. Like a lot of people, I think, focus so much on Harry and Meghan. And yes, they have a part to play because I can see the similarities between them. But to me, once you actually read the book, and I do highly recommend reading the book, it is super interesting to see sort of the pattern of bad behavior, especially when it comes to finances with Andrew. That pattern of behavior can definitely be repeated again. And I feel like it's so important to understand like what went wrong because you have to be able to fix it. And this is a pattern that could repeat. Obviously, you don't have somebody in the same situation, but Andrew was indulged. I think we need to be careful not to let other royal members of the royal family be indulged. And so I feel like when it comes to Catherine and William, although sometimes I wish they would work maybe a smidge more, I do think they will hopefully come out with some of the best adjusted royal children out of the bunch. And that will only serve for good in the future. It's hard, but yeah. Yeah. So, through the Looking Glass channel with Alice says, we need to be careful blaming the sins of the children on the parents. This is starting to affect Queen Elizabeth's reputation, and people are blaming her parenting for all of Andrew's misbehavior. So, it's not definitely all, because we do obviously have Beatrice and Eugenie came out of the Andrew situation well. Some people do break sort of the pattern of behavior, although I was concerned too that they have so much involvement in the Middle East, and so did he. I'm like, oh, that you guys were a little bit better, but I guess not. But I do think parenting does play an issue here. And if, let's say, Marius had like complete, if it was just like, let's say, violence against women or something like that, which he is accused of perpetrating, then I would say more of, sometimes we all have like these. I think, and this is just from my Christian perspective, I think we all have sins we have greater predilection to. So for some people, like I've taken heavy duty narcotics after I've broken bones, and I don't, they don't affect me at all. I have no desire, like I don't even understand why like the high people allegedly get from it. I don't get it. Doesn't like but other people can take something like that and be completely dependent on it, because I think we all have, because we're all broken in our own sinful ways, have things that we are have greater predilection to. So when it comes to, you know, Marius, if it was just violence against women or something like that, I'd be like, well, it could be those sort of natural predilections. And then again, too much at the same time, maybe some parenting as well. But I think when it combines with the drugs, Metamart with her criminal connections, him with his criminal connections, having the kids over to the house and stuff like that. And her like cleaning up after him. Like she literally was going into his room, like right before the police arrested him, and cleaning up his place. And he kind of alleged basically that she is the one who took his SIM card out of his phone. Like he kind of like, well, he's like, well, when I called earlier, it was there. When I came back, it was gone, and my mom was picking up. Basically, he threw his mom under the bus. And so while I don't think parenting is everything, because obviously we are all individual humans capable of making decisions, at the same time, I do feel like there is a family connection in play here that started with Metamart before she and Marius's father, and has continued into now. And so I feel like because of that, you can't just say, well, this kid ended up, and of course this happens. There's always aberrations. This is not a definitive 100%. But if one kid tends to have an issue, other kids may tend to have issues too. And it's not always everything, but it's just complicated. So I just feel like you can't totally though avoid the parenting aspect to that here. And I feel like it's really kind of concerning a bit. I think for the future, I would be concerned if I was a Norwegian citizen, to be quite honest. So that is also yeah. Carol said also Queen Elizabeth blamed herself for what happened to Princess Margaret and let Andre and Andrew and Harry were coddled. Yeah. And honestly, Queen Elizabeth did bury her head in the sand when it came to Andrew. She was part of it. She let him have this role that other people were like, do you know what's going on? And she was just like, no. She pulled him away when she had to. And so yeah, she holds part of the blame here. She just does. And yeah, unfortunately, your children, the actions of your children will have an impact on your personal reputation as well. I can't remember, it's kind of like one of those things where it says when it comes to taking parenting advice, wait and see how somebody's children turn out, and then look to their parenting advice in some ways, because, you know, they have to be through the storms in some aspects. So Angela said a comedian joke where if every family has an effed up kid and you can't think of who it is, it's you. Probably. So yeah, it's just kind of sad. But yeah, people are weak to certain kids. Allison Rance Rave says, personally, I believe the Queen thought Andrew was weak and he didn't have a stable life, so she tried to help him more. Yeah. And even in the best of intentions as a parent can go sideways. It's kind of funny, guys. Sometimes I watch those body cam videos, and it's amazing to watch grown adults like have toddler level meltdowns. It was funny one video, like the cops were like, I would take a 250-pound dude over this tiny 100-pound girl any day of the week because they're like, they're crazier. And like, you got to be careful not to hurt them quite as much and stuff like that. But, I watched some of that and I do think a lot of it comes down to parenting. I just do. I think it's something you can't ignore from this scenario. Like if you haven't been told no, if you haven't been told something. But yeah, and there will be generational issues in some families and it's just tough. Like and there's no easy solution because obviously we're all sinful. We can't help that. I mean, even if you're not a Christian, we all have to agree that every person we meet is broken in one way or another. And because of that, people either work really hard to try to heal that brokenness as much as they can during their lives. They're never faultless, of course. But then at the same time, as well, you have some people who don't really amend the mistakes of the past and have a repeat them. And I feel like, unfortunately, for Marius, that's sort of the case that I'm seeing is that I'm seeing a repeated pattern of behavior when it comes to him and his mom. And what started with her has continued into him. And yeah, it's just a very big concern for what the future looks like for Ingrid Alexandra and Sir Magnus because they both seem fine, but Marius seemed fine. Although we were getting rumors and talks and stuff like that. Everything seemed fine until it blew up too. So hopefully they're fine. Hopefully they're much more stable and stable characters. But sometimes you don't know until you know, and that could make or break the Norwegian monarchy. It really could, especially once Harold passes away. If the Marius thing goes really, really south, again, we're seeing we might see a very different future for the Norwegians. Briggs said, I so agree about the body cam videos. They don't know how to listen or to not meet the main character. It is fascinating. I really suggest watching them and having much more respect for law enforcement officers because the level of stuff they deal with. And I'm like, this one girl I watched recently, she was just told, you just need to like the manager guy didn't want her there. He thought she was disruptive, wasn't helping the customers correctly or whatever. And so he asked her to leave and she wouldn't leave. So he called the police and she still wouldn't leave. And then she got arrested and then got charged, I think, with assaulting a police officer too. And it's like, just leave. Why did you? And it's kind of funny. This one particular channel, this guy comes on sometimes afterwards. And he was so right. It's like, she had her pride on the line and she put her pride before common sense and got too emotional. And it resulted in, instead of just getting maybe let go or maybe having a discussion about behavior, she probably got fired because she was charged with felonies. So it's like, but I have so much more respect for law enforcement officers. I can't even tell you guys. Can't even tell you guys. So it's just like, wow. But I am given, especially how well, obviously Catherine's family has turned out. I feel like that bodes well for the future of the Wales as kids too. I think, Norway, you have Hakan, who is seemingly sort of the rock, and then you have, the craziness of his sister Martha Louise, and so like you can't turn anywhere and go, oh, both the kids turned out well because they really didn't. And that probably goes to Harold and Sonia's parenting as well. As somebody pointed out, which is probably true, is that they may have indulged their kids a little bit too much when it came to their loves because Sonia and Harold had to fight so hard to get married. And maybe they indulged their kids too much on that level. And we end up with the shaman and we end up with Marius. So like, obviously, and some things could change. But anyways, that's right. Oh, Teaspoon says, Royal News Network, Brittany. I think that's the same one I watched. It probably is. Probably is. It's just wild to watch people go, no, I didn't do X. And it's like, but you just did X, or them arguing over nothing. It's like, I'm just asking you to sit in the chair and they won't sit in the chair. And I'm like, why? Won't you sit in the chair? But it's also came from my mom. She told us as kids to sit in the chair. We sat in the chair, guys, because my mom didn't take nothing, but it was all done within love because discipline is love. There is a level of love and discipline. Letting your kids run crazy It's is not really love. Like, some of my favorite teachers were the ones that were, you could say, tough on us because they didn't allow us to do whatever we wanted. I think there's something to that. Anyways, yeah, and Rid says those body cam videos are just insane. I watch tons of them, just cannot help myself what these law enforcement officers go through. Yeah, I mean, it really is quite amazing. Rid's going, "You're under arrest." "No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not." It's so true, guys. I can't even tell you. You watch them, they're like, "You're under arrest." Like, "No, no, I'm not." I'm like, "But you are. I just told you that. I'm the law enforcement officer." Oh my goodness. Okay. Um, oh man, I find those so crazy. Yeah, and JD says Charles is guilty parent because of the Diana Camilla drama he created. Yeah, that factored into William and Harry's upbringing too. And there's also a little bit of a generational thing because I've heard that Charles can have a bit of a temper at times. So can William, and obviously we've seen Harry have it too. Harry, I think, is more destructive and stuff like that. But like, yeah, you know, Frigg says kids needs discipline and like routine. Yeah, they do. They do. It's the best thing for them. And sometimes the best thing you can do is be told no. You can't do X, Y, and Z. And yeah, I feel like my mom raised us really well. We got spanked from time to time, but I think that's can be a very good thing. But it wasn't done. My mom did the Dr. James Dobson approach, which is that you only do it out of love, not out of anger, and only do it as a way of correcting, not because you want to, kind of like you're out of anger or something. It has to be contained within a disciplinary approach, if that makes sense. Um, and so one of my things my mom did too, just to say it, and just because I have to brag on my mom a bit. She told us, and I don't remember this because I was a kid, but she would make us, like, if we were, let's say, a kid throwing a temper tantrum at a grocery store, she would take us out of the grocery store. We might get either talking to or maybe a little bit of a spanking. And then she would bring us back into the store because she's like, "You're not going to disrupt my day with your temper tantrum. You're not going to win. I'm mom. I dictate what we do." And I feel like that's a great little great little cute little thing my mom does. Just gotta share my mom's schedule there because I or action there because I think that was good. That was good. Teaching me as a child that there's certain things you have to do. You have to listen to me. I am mom. I am the leader of this household, not you. I lead it. And so yeah. So anyways, I just always thought that was good. So, anyways, just gotta brag on my mom there. So yeah, this got really kind of weird. Yeah. Alice Ransom Ray says King Charles is a very soft-hearted man with a bad temper. As someone who has a bad temper, it is incredibly hard to control. And what I can see, he manages okay. Yes, and my understanding too is he may blow up at a staff member, but he almost immediately apologizes and said he's sorry. And I think that goes a long way. And that, if you're a staff member, you go, "Oh yeah, sometimes he has, he'll kind of freak out on you for a second. Just let it pass, and then he's fine." And so I think that that's sometimes what happens. Yeah. Yeah, Rebel, Lucy Cat says, "Yep, that's how I grew up. That's how I raised my kids. They're so respectful, not fearful." Exactly. Exactly. I think my mom did it right. Not perfect, because who is? But I think that's kind of the general direction you should go. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Rebecca says children want to be told no. It shows that you love them. Exactly. Yeah. Isabel said my mom just needs to give me the look and I would be on my best behavior. Yeah, my mom's I think she said that she would sometimes go around, like, travel around a little bit, and she had, like, the paddle handy, and all I needed to do was see it, and I was good. She didn't need to do anything else, I just needed to see it. And she said I was just a bit easier and even a bit easier to, kind of lead down that path, and, uh, I wasn't too willful, I guess you could say. So, yeah. Ooh, I forgot about this. Through the Looking Glass channel with Alice says Diana had a bad temper too. She pushed Rain, her stepmother, down the stairs. Ooh, that's not good. And yeah, I like the instability and the drama Diana had in her childhood. I'm not surprised by that. I'm not surprised by that. Yeah. Alice Ransom Ray says, I never even attempted to argue with my mom. I knew there was no point. No meant no. Yeah. And that's what it looks like in most like that's how it should be. No means no. Um yeah. So that's how at least that's how I was raised. The only thing though my mom threatened but never did was wash my mouth out with soap. I never got that. I never got that. I think I was close a time or two, but she never actually did that. I think because she hated it. But nobody's perfect. We're all kids. We're all like we all had, nobody's perfect. So, yeah. Yeah, JD said bad parenting by Diana in my opinion. Yeah. Diana, like, I don't think in some ways was the greatest parents. I think she loved like with all her heart, but I think she also was, did not help things either in a lot of ways. So, and I think William is who he is in spite of her in some ways. Because you do have people who had unstable childhoods, not sometimes the best upbringing, and make the decision, hey, I'm going to change my life. And there's some people who make the same mistakes as their parents do over and over and over and over and over again. So, yeah. So yeah, this is a good question to respond to. Shell Bell says there's no perfect ways to raise a child, and adults are responsible for their own actions. Stop blaming parents. So we're not blaming parents, but you cannot take parenting wholly out of the equation either. There's some cases where yes, like I think of in particular like serial killers and stuff like that. Some of that is like wholly like a something horrible, like that child was born that way in some cases. Like there's just nothing you could have done at all to prevent that 150%. But I also think as well that you can't take it out of the equation either. When it comes to Marius, especially because he's still in his 20s and stuff like that. He basically lives with his parents. He lives on a house within their property. He has always been within their orbit. I don't think you can fully take him out of that situation, like his parents out of that equation. Yes, he makes his own choice as adults, but all of us can say, I think definitively, that our parents have had a huge impact on our lives, even as adults. Like it was kind of a funny scenario with my parents recently. Like we were all going to go to my grandparents to visit, and I was like, oh, there's gonna be a lot of us. It's sort of a small house. We're all becoming adults at this point. And I was like, I was gonna stay at a hotel. My mom's like, no, you need to stay here for your grandparents. And I was like, I listened to my mom. And so I said, okay. And then later she was like, okay, next time you can stay where you want to. And I'm like, okay. But it's one of those things where you can't fully blame the parents because obviously adults make their own decisions. And there's some situations where there are things that are like completely out of your control. There's, unfortunately, some people have psychopathy and various things that like just are an aberration. But at the same time, I don't think you can fully separate how a parent raised a child, especially when they're Marius's age. I think it played a huge role. And I think that is part of how we ended up here. So, and Diana too, indulging William and Harry in some ways, or when in the case of William, treating him like almost he was like her second spouse or something. She would tell him things that he probably should not have been privy to as a child. And so that impacted him. And I think impacted him in positive ways and negative ways. I think in some ways, what we see of William now is somebody who wants his kids to have a childhood in part because he didn't really have one in some ways and wanted to have a really stable wife because his mom's was unstable. And so I think all of that factors in together. And I think all of it does play. It doesn't fully explain everything. Nothing ever does. But I feel like we are all the products of our upbringings. And that is for both good and ill because nobody is perfect. No parent is perfect. And I feel like that is really important to consider. So that's always where my stipulation is. And I know not everybody agrees, but I've seen that play out. Seen that play out. So yeah. And yeah, and there's always differences. Alice Ransom Ray says, I think it very much varies. Prince Philip had an incredibly unstable childhood and basically raised himself, but he turned himself around and became a good man. Yeah. I mean, there's aberrations. People break the cycles, but we can't. And it was a very different time in some ways for people of Philip's generation, because you did tend to, let's say, lose out on, like, family members died much earlier. Like my great grandpa, like, he essentially raised himself. It was kind of funny because we found out many, many years ago, like just a couple years ago, and my great grandfather has been dead probably for like 30 plus years now, that he had, or 35, yeah, probably 35 years or something, that he had a son that nobody knew about. The son had passed away because my great grandfather would obviously be well into his hundreds by now. But yeah, he had a son nobody knew about. So there's good and bad things from it, but like some people are able to break a cycle and some people just repeat it. So it has to take, I think, a conscientious effort for people to say, I've seen how my parents have lived, or I've seen how other people have lived, and I'm going to make a conscious effort to break the pattern and recognize the faults and try not to repeat some of them. You can't always avoid that, but I think it's comes from a very conscientious place. But, some of his personality, I'm sure, was manifested in a reaction to having an unstable childhood, raising himself. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Lizzie B said, gifted one Royal News Network membership. Why, thank you so much, Lizzie B, because we do have really exciting thing for the members. So we will be doing two things later this month. Hopefully, if it airs correctly, we'll be doing a watch party for the King and Conqueror. So this is a new show about Edward the Confessor and his death, I'm sure, and the Battle of Hastings, and the very brief King Harold of England, and William the Conqueror. So very, very excited about that. And then we'll be doing the same thing we did last time for With Love Meghan, where I may watch the first, I think last time I did the first two episodes, I did a watch party of With Love Meghan. And then for the rest, we did a members watch party. And I don't know if that was too much or not. So we'll have to you guys will have to let me know if it was too much last time or what you enjoyed, because it was just like, whoa, it was just a lot. But anyways, it was fun. But yeah, we'll definitely be doing a King and Conqueror watch party, and then also a With Love Meghan, because that's coming up. That's coming up. So, all right. We will go ahead, guys, I think, and wrap it up. Yes. And Rance Ray says, and watch parties. Yes. Watch parties are great. They're going to be so much fun, guys. So it is 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. So we have been going for about 2 hours now. So we will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for tuning in. I don't think we'll be doing one next week at all. So we will start back in September, but I'm still sort of trying to figure out what date and time, just because I think when it comes to, like what I want to sort of manage my schedule, like Saturday is convenient, but at the same time too, I want to be available to do things with people on Saturday, especially if it happens in the morning. So again, we are looking to maybe change things up. We shall see, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful Saturday or Sunday, wherever you're at. And I shall speak to you again very soon.